Mixwave has released the Electrodyne 511 EQ based on the EQ of the 1960s transistor-based console. This plugin uses iLok also for the trial. I personally don't mind that, but I'm sure that alone will put off some potential users. By default, the plugin boosts by 0.1 of a decibel. Now, this is not much by any means, but it can be just enough to fool you into thinking that this plugin sounds better right out of the gate. The EQ behavior is pretty peculiar. When we switch between the high bands on this vocal, you notice that the 5K boost sounds thinner than the other ones.
I am a thief in the night. I am the stars in your eyes. The nightmare that's coming for you. An uncomfortable truth. Hold me. I am a thief in the night. I am the stars in your eyes. The nightmare that's coming for you. An uncomfortable truth. Hold me.
And when we dive into Plugin Doctor, you can see that this band has a smaller width than the others. In fact, all bands differ from each other, which makes for an interesting play with the EQ boost or cut and their frequencies. Staying on this high band in bell mode, when you switch between the frequencies you'll see that the upper range of the boost stays basically the same. The lower part moves. The frequency dial almost works like a width control. The highest band is a shelf. This doesn't change even when you switch between shelf and bell. With the other three bands, when you switch to shelf and change the frequency, you get normal shelf EQ behavior. That means that the top end stays the same, while the lower end of the shelf moves up. The lower band shows a similar behavior with the frequency bands and modes. In bell, the 250 Hz frequency has a bit smaller width than the 500. The lowest two frequency bands are always in shelf mode. In either cut or boost in bell mode, when you crank the dials, the peaks get more focused. And this is pretty normal EQ behavior. The Electrodyne 511 never gets surgical. All cuts or boosts are broad. It's more about tonal shaping than precise EQing. The broad curves sound pleasant and will basically always work. Now before we continue, please make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. There are harmonics added by this plugin. The first harmonic added is about 100 decibels lower than the incoming audio. When you listen carefully and I really push the input for this next bass guitar, you do hear this all adds a subtle punch, and due to the saturation this all sounds a bit more constant and evened out. You basically cannot get this plugin into distortion. There's a ton of headroom and I have to do very weird things to get some sort of overdrive. With this extreme pre-plugin boost, it's also easy to test if the EQ of the 511 itself is placed before or after the saturation circuit. And as you can hear, it's after. This means that the EQ does not have an effect on the saturation, which I find a bit of a shame. This plugin has its resize issues, at least on Windows, as you can see. This feels a bit sloppy. Now overall in use I find this a pleasant EQ. But I am not blown away with either the sound and absolutely not in functionality. The intro price of $54 ex VAT isn't amazing either, I think. Maybe you think this is the exact right EQ to add to your audio toolshed, and I suggest you try out the demo first.